Welcome to the third of this series of 12 lessons on the Son of Promise and the Master Manipulator, looking at the lives of Isaac and Jacob from Genesis chapters 25 to 38. Before we get into the text, let's review what we covered in the last lesson, or the last two lessons. After 20 years of barrenness, Rebekah conceived. God told her that she was carrying twins who would become two nations, and that the older would serve the younger. The first son, Esau, was born red and hairy. The second, Jacob, was born grasping Esau's heel. As they grew, Esau became a hunter, favored by his father Isaac, while Jacob was a quiet man, favored by Rebekah. Famished after a time in the field, presumably a hunt, Esau carelessly sold his birthright to Jacob for a bowl of Jacob's red stew. In the previous chapter 26, we saw that a famine forced Isaac to move to Gerar, where God reaffirmed the covenant made with Abraham. Fearing the local men would kill him to take his beautiful wife, Rebekah, Isaac told the people that she was his sister. The local king discovered the truth, but protected them from being harmed. And Isaac prospered, reaping 100-fold harvest, becoming very wealthy. God was blessing him. The local Philistines grew jealous, forced him to move, and they plugged up the wells that Abraham had previously dug. Isaac relocated and successfully dug new wells. Isaac ended up moving to Beersheba, where God again reassured him. King Abimelech came to seek a peace treaty and a non-aggression pact with Isaac. And that chapter closed telling us that at age 40, Esau married two Canaanite women, which brought great grief to his parents. In chapter 27, we're going to see the conflict between Jacob and Esau come to a boiling point due to the family blessing. So an outline for this chapter would probably look something like this. The first 17 verses, Rebekah and Jacob prepared to deceive Isaac. And then Jacob received the blessing of the eldest. And then finally we'll see Esau's anger at losing the blessing. So let's begin with verse 1. When Isaac was old and his eyes had failed, he called Esau his older son and said, "My son." Esau replied, "Here am I." Isaac said, "Behold, I am old and do not know the day of my death. Take now your arrows, your quiver, your bow, and go out to the field and hunt a deer for me. Prepare tasty venison such as I love. Bring it to me and I will eat it. I will bless you before I die." However, Rebekah heard what Isaac had said to Esau. Esau went to the field to hunt for a deer. Rebekah said to Jacob, "I heard your father telling Esau, 'Hunt for a deer and make tasty venison, and I will eat it, and I will bless you before Yahweh before I die. Now, my son, listen to what I command you. Go to the flock, take 2 choice kids of the goats. I will make tasty food for your father, such as he loves. You will take it to him, and he will eat it, and he will bless you before his death." But Jacob replied to his mother, "Look, Esau's hairy, while I'm smooth of skin. Perhaps my father will feel me, and then I will be in his eyes a mocker, and you will bring a curse on me, and no blessing." His mother answered, "Upon me let your curse be, my son. Only obey me. Go and get the kids." He went and took the kids and brought them to his mother, who made tasty food such as his father loved. Then Rebekah took Esau's best clothes, which were with her in the house, and put them on Jacob. She put the skins from the kids on his hands and his smooth neck. She placed the tasty food and bread, which she had prepared, in Jacob's hands. Campbell Morgan says that from this point, the history passes to center largely around Jacob. At the beginning, 4 persons stand out: Isaac, Rebekah, Esau, and Jacob, and not one of them is admirable. Isaac is even more degenerate in his devotion to the physical. Rebekah knows the purpose of God, but is not content to wait. Esau is still the same man, a man of physical strength, completely centered therein. Jacob is weak as he yields to the suggestion of his mother. Isaac was getting old. We saw at the end of chapter 26 that he was at least around 100 at that time, and this seems to be quite a few years after the Abimelech incidents. It would seem that Isaac was probably around 130 years old by this point. Now, Jacob was 130 when Joseph was 39. So there's almost 90 years difference in age between Jacob and his son Joseph, and we'll get to that in our latter weeks of this. But it tells us that Jacob would have been almost 90 when Joseph was born, and that was about 20 years after Jacob left his parents. So Jacob would have been around 70 when this took place. So 30 years have elapsed between the end of chapter 26 and the beginning of chapter 27. Isaac decided it was time to bless his sons. Now, this blessing was considered legally binding as an oral will. Jack Lewis wrote in his little work, Understanding Genesis, blessings and curses were thought to have particular power in the patriarchal period. Near the end of life, it was customary for a man to bless his descendants, which had an effect on their future. And he cites Genesis 49, Jacob's blessing, and later on Deuteronomy 33. Examples of this practice from the city of Nuzu have been found by the archaeologists. So this is something that was normal in this culture at this time period. The eldest normally received the greatest blessing. Remember, before their birth, God had prophesied that Jacob would be the greater, rather than vice versa. We also find that Isaac's senses were letting him down. His eyes were dim so that he could not see. He sent Esau out to kill game, to prepare him a favorite meal, and then he would bless him. The Hebrew word here for sitting out to get game is the word tzayid, and it simply means game or provisions. The King James Version translates it as venison, as does Hugo McCord, and it may have been venison, but it's not conclusive from the word itself. The Bible Study Notes talks also about this blessing. The Hebrew says, so that my soul may bless you. The use of nafshi, my soul, as a subject emphasizes that the blessing will be made with all Isaac's desire and vitality. The conjunction so that closely relates the meal to the blessing, suggesting that this will be a ritual meal in conjunction with the giving of a formal blessing. Apparently, with the loss of his sight, he feared that he would die soon. The reality is he actually lived many more years. He died at the age 180, and he's 130 now. So he has 50 more years left. But of course, he doesn't know that. Bill Grasham writes, Isaac made no mention of this to Jacob. This is strange because blessings of this type were important events which all the male offspring were to attend. The father would bless each in order, organizing the succession of authority within the family, as Jacob later did in Egypt. It seems clear that Isaac intended to bypass Jacob completely. He either ignored or forgot Yahweh's prophecy to Rebekah that the older, who was Esau, would serve the younger, who was Jacob. Notice in verse 7 that this blessing was to be in the presence of Yahweh. Yet he seems to be deliberately ignoring Yahweh's instruction. Rebekah overheard this conversation and was determined to get the blessing for Jacob. After all, God had told her that he would be the greater. And it would seem that Isaac was determined to do this without her knowledge, hence the haste. It would seem, as we mentioned in Bill Gresham's comment, that this was normally a family event. And we're going to see at the end of Genesis, of course, Jacob's was very much a family event. He gathered all his sons around him for the blessing. She had Jacob bring 2 choice kids and prepare a dish that would taste like the one that Esau made from game that Isaac liked so much. You know, it probably didn't take too much to make the goat taste like game. Lamb and beef are very similar in taste. So with goat similar to lamb and venison similar to beef, it was probably more in the way it was prepared that made it taste similar. Having said that, we had a girl from the United States visiting with us eating kebabs, which are, of course, lamb. She thought they were wonderful until we told her that it was lamb, and then she wouldn't touch it because it tasted just like beef. And so they do have very similar tastes. But there's another problem, wasn't there? Jacob and Esau looked different. Jacob was smooth and fair. Esau was hairy. Although with Isaac's failing eyesight, this would be less of a problem from a visual perspective. So what Rebekah did was took the skins from the kids and put them on Jacob's hands and neck. It makes you wonder how hairy Esau really was. She brought Esau's best clothing for Jacob to wear, clothing that he would have worn on special occasions, such as that day. Presumably, he's already married, so he's left these clothes at home, although they might be living in the same camp. She gave Jacob the food to take to Isaac. Jacob's only objection was not about what they were doing, but the fear that he would be discovered, and therefore the disguise that he was wearing. He was afraid that if he were discovered, he would be cursed rather than blessed. The patriarch's words were regarded as prophetic statements. Once a blessing or curse was pronounced, it couldn't be retracted. But Jacob does not seem to have had any concern about the rightness or wrongness of what he was about to do. And Rebekah did assume all responsibility. Bill Gresham again. In other words, she promised Jacob all of the benefits of his father's blessing, yet he would suffer none of the punishments of a curse if their conspiracy failed. Rebekah was willing to endure serious consequences in her life and marriage for the sake of her plan. Henry Morris, in his commentary, suggested that she was doing this fully intending that Jacob be caught and in that way bring Isaac to his senses. I don't really think the text can support that idea. Moving on to verse 18, which tells us about the actual incident. Jacob went to his father and said, "My father." Isaac replied, "Here I am. But who are you?" Jacob answered, "I am Esau, your firstborn. I've done what you ask." Isaac inquired, "How are you able to find a deer so quickly, my son?" Jacob replied, "Because Yahweh your God gave me success." Isaac said, "Come near that I may feel you to know if you are my son Esau or not." Jacob came near to Isaac, who felt him and said, "It's Jacob's voice, but the hands are Esau's." So Isaac did not recognize him, for his hands were hairy like Esau's hands, and he blessed him. Then Isaac said, "Are you really my son Esau?" Jacob answered, "I am." Isaac said, "Bring the food to me, and I will eat the venison, and I will bless you." Jacob brought the food to him, and he ate. And Jacob served him with wine, and he drank. And Isaac said to Jacob, "Come near and kiss me, my son." Jacob came near and kissed him. Isaac smelled the scent of his clothes and blessed him, saying, "Behold, the fragrance of my son is the fragrance of the field, blessed by Yahweh. God will give to you from heaven's dew and of the earth's fruitfulness with an abundance of grain and new wine. Peoples will serve you. Nations will bow down to you. You be the Lord over your brothers. The sons of your mother will bow down to you. Cursed are they who curse you, and blessed are they who bless you." So Jacob enters with the food. Keep in mind, throughout this, that Isaac is blind. He cannot see the deception, so he had to rely on his other senses. He heard Jacob's voice. Ears tell the truth. It would be inconceivable that Jacob wouldn't have at least tried to disguise his voice in some way, but he still knew from the voice it was not Esau. So he asked Jacob who he was, and of course Jacob lies. "I am Esau, your firstborn, bringing you your favorite meal." This was going to take more deceit to pull off than Rebekah had anticipated. Jacob's going to have to convince Isaac that he was Esau. Isaac asked how he was able to kill game, prepare food so quickly. And if you're familiar with hunting, it often takes a long time to find and kill an animal, especially a deer, as the King James and the McCord's translation have. And add to that the time to skin the animal, prepare the food. Also remember how long he seemed to be out when he sold his birthright. It takes time. Well, Jacob's answer, well, God gave him success. Notice he says, "Your God gave me success." He asked that Jacob come nearer so he could touch him. He felt the skins on Jacob's hands. They were hairy like Esau's, so his touch was deceived. So he's having some sensory problems, is he not? The ears said it was Jacob, but his touch said it was Esau. He again questioned him, "Are you really Esau?" Jacob again lied. "I am." You know, there are 3 lies that Jacob told to deceive Isaac. He said that he was Esau twice, and he said that God had given him success in an early kill. He dressed as well to deceive his father. Isaac decided to test his other senses. He asked for his favorite dish so he could eat it and then bless him. He ate the dish, and it tasted like Esau's. His taste was deceived. While receiving a kiss from his son, he smelled his clothing. It smelled like Esau. His nose was deceived. And Isaac was satisfied. 3 out of 4 of his working senses confirmed it was Esau. So it must have been, although the one that gave the contrary vote is the one that would be difficult to fool, and that is his ears. With the meal eaten, Isaac then blessed Jacob with the blessing he had intended for Esau. "May the land produce for you. May peoples and nations serve you. May your brothers bow down to you." I did find it interesting the word brothers is plural. Probably refers to relatives, or vaguely the possibility that Rebekah might have more children, or maybe he might have more children through another wife. But more likely it's talking about kinsmen, which is what New American Standard has, or relatives, which is what the New International Version has. He was making it clear that no matter what, the one who received this blessing would be the one who had been given the family authority. The Net Bible Study Note says it's an invitation to exercise authority over his brothers and indicates that he is granted such authority by the patriarch of the family. Furthermore, the blessing enables the recipient to accomplish this. Cursed be those who curse you, blessed be those who bless you. That's what God told Abraham back in Genesis chapter 3. So Genesis chapter 12, verse 3. So he receives the blessing of the promise. Bill Grasham writes, Isaac's blessing followed a logical sequence, beginning with agricultural blessings on Jacob and his family. Next, it implied his descendants would grow into a settlement and depose those who would live on their land and establish their own social, economic, and political system. Then the blessing stretched into the distant future, anticipating the multiplication of his son's posterity into a nation that would become strong enough to subdue political enemies. Isaac envisioned this success by saying, "May people serve you and nations bow down to you." If Isaac had not been in such a hurry to bless Esau, he might have figured it out that it was Jacob who was standing before him. But he seems to be impatient in his haste. Notice the direct going against God's plan. He thought he was giving this to Esau, and that Jacob and his descendants would serve Esau's descendants. But Jacob was God's choice to receive the blessing. Romans chapter 9, verse 12, the earlier prophecy, and probably God had not planned that Jacob would receive this blessing in this manner that he chose of lying and deception. God's plan was that Jacob would have received it. But Isaac's trying to go against that and give that blessing to Esau. Edwin Jones, in his studies in Genesis, wrote, "Here Rebekah and Jacob worked together in a rebellion against God. Even though they sought to bring about the reality of the prophetic pronouncement made about Jacob and Esau, their methods are just as flawed by reliance on human ability as were those of Isaac and Esau. They display that they have no real trust in the power of God, but they rather place confidence in themselves." William Smith wrote, "It must be observed that Isaac was in the wrong when he attempted to give Esau the blessing. He could not have been ignorant of God's decree about the sons before they were born. However much we deplore the acts of Rebekah and Jacob, the greater fault was with Isaac and Esau." So again, we see that really all three patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, were people just like you and me. They made mistakes. They lived like people do. Final section is the reaction of Esau when all of this happens. As Isaac finished blessing Jacob, immediately after he left, Esau came in from his hunt. He also prepared tasty food and brought it to his father and said, "Sit up and eat your son's venison and bless me." Isaac responded, "Who are you?" He answered, "I'm your firstborn son Esau." Isaac trembled from head to foot and exclaimed, "Who then prepared food and brought it to me? And I ate all of it before you came, and I blessed him, and indeed he shall be blessed." When Esau heard his father's words, he cried out loudly and bitterly and said to his father, "Bless me, yes, me also, O my father." Isaac answered, "Your brother came and deceitfully took your blessing." Esau said, "Is not his name called Jacob, heel planter or supplanter, heel grabber or supplanter? He has supplanted me 2 times. He took my birthright, and now he's taken my blessing." Esau pleaded, "Oh, my father, have you not saved a blessing for me?" Isaac replied, Behold, I have made him your Lord, and all his brothers I have given to him as servants. With grain and new wine I have sustained him. What now will I do for you, my son?" Esau said, "Do you have one blessing, O my father? Bless me, even me, O my father." Esau lifted his voice and wept. Isaac replied, "Behold, away from the fruitfulness of the earth you will dwell, and away from heaven's dew from above. You will live by your sword, and you will serve your brother. However, you will break loose and tear away his yoke from your neck." Esau held a grudge against Jacob because of the blessing which his father had bestowed on him, and said in his heart, "The days of mourning for my father are approaching, then I will kill Jacob." However, Rebekah was told about the words of Esau, and she called for Jacob and said, "Behold, Esau will take vengeance by killing you. Now hear me. Flee to Laban my brother in Haran. Stay with him some days until your brother's rage has subsided, and he's forgotten what you did to them. Then I will send and bring you back from there. Why should I lose both of you in one day?" So as Jacob left, Esau returned from hunting. After preparing food for Isaac, he entered for the blessing. We're probably talking about a gap of at least probably several hours, as Esau would need to possibly dress his kill unless he did that in the field, and then prepare and cook it until it was tender. When Isaac heard Jacob's voice, he knew that he had been tricked, and he trembled violently. The Hebrew text literally says, he trembled a great trembling to a great degree. He had a violent reaction to Esau's arrival. Peter Williams, in his commentary, suggested that the trembling was due to his realization that God had known his attempt to give the blessing to Esau. He asked, who was it then who had come earlier that he had blessed? Well, the answer was obvious, was it not? Isaac had already blessed Jacob, and it was irrevocable. Hebrew writer talks about this scene in Hebrews chapter 12. Take care that no one falls short of God's grace. Take care that no bitter root springs up and troubles you and defiles many. Take care that no one be immoral or irreligious like Esau, who gave up his birthright for one meal. You know that when he later wanted to inherit the blessing, he was rejected. He could not get his father to change his mind, though he begged tearfully. Esau's comment about Jacob was, Jacob suits his name. Jacob meant one of two things, and McCord pointed those out in his translation. He that takes by the heel, or he who supplants. Jacob had now supplanted Esau twice. The word supplant means to take the place of another, especially by force or trickery. Esau asked if Isaac did not have a blessing reserved someplace for him. Isaac answered, what can I do? I've already made him your master, given him the best of the land. There's nothing left, which shows that this is why he intended for Jacob to have the other, nothing. Esau's reaction was of anguish. Have you but one blessing, my father? Bless me, even me also, O my father. And Esau lifted up his voice and wept. And Isaac gave Esau a blessing of sorts. Bill Grasham commented on it. The blessing that Isaac bestowed on Esau was actually an anti-blessing or curse, for it was the opposite of what he pronounced on Jacob. Instead of receiving the dew of heaven and the fatness of the earth, with an abundance of new grain and new wine, his dwelling would be in Edom, away from the fertility of the earth and the dew of heaven. In other words, he would live by his sword in an inhospitable land of high mountain and desert. His blessing, the opposite of Jacob's. He would live away from the blessings of the earth. He would serve his brother. He was given the blessing to live unblessed and untamed. The only positive aspect of the blessing was that one day he would break the yoke of his brother's domination, which Edom eventually did break free of Israel's control. Here's a photo of this area that was once Edom, today, now in the country of Jordan. Esau's descendants would live here in Edom. And even today, as you can see, it's very dry, very barren. Esau vowed that after Isaac died, he would kill Jacob. I think in his mind, killing Jacob, he would regain the blessing and the birthright. Jacob at this point is not married, has no children. And Isaac thinks he's going to die soon. That really was his only consolation, that one day he would kill his brother and regain what he had lost. He seems to have thought that his father was at the point of death. Morris commented that Esau suddenly changed from an indifferent, carefree sportsman into a bitter, vindictive neurotic. This is probably a fair assessment of the change that took place in him. Apparently, he have voiced this. He have voiced what he wanted to do to his brother, because someone heard it and told Rebekah. She planned then to send Jacob to her brother Laban in Haran. When Esau calmed down, she would then send for Jacob. What was supposed to be a brief visit, though, ended up lasting 20 years. Bill Grasham writes, Rebekah's plan to send for her favorite son never materialized. As far as we know, this was the last time they saw each other. Notice she says, I don't want to lose you both in one day. Is she talking about losing both sons in one day? If Esau killed Jacob, he would undoubtedly be banished, thus losing two sons instead of one, whom she could later reclaim. Or maybe a better possibility, this is what Edwin Jones had in his commentary. She was talking about losing both of the ones she loved in one day, Isaac and Jacob, which she would do if Esau killed Jacob the day of Isaac's death. Verse 46 really goes with the opening verses of the next chapter, so I didn't read it, and we will deal with that when we look at chapter 28. Jim McGuigan writes about this section. Did Jacob reap a heavenly reward by being a good hypocrite and conning his father? No. The trust is that God had already chosen to bless Jacob rather than Esau. This decision was made before the children were born, having done neither good nor evil, and that the purpose of God, according to election, might stand out not of works, but of him who calls. Quoting, of course, Romans chapter 9. Esau's profanity didn't exclude him, and Jacob's cunning didn't provide for him. As the channel of blessing for the world, Esau wasn't rejected because of his worldliness, and Jacob was chosen in spite of his cheating heart. And Bill Grasham writes, the tragedy that is portrayed here is not the final word in the story. This is but one act in an ongoing drama that had continued after these characters had left the stage of life. Their story does not emphasize primarily human sin, suffering, and estrangement. Rather, as we continue to follow the story, we become more aware of the amazing grace of the God who works with frail human beings. He calls, blesses, and uses such people, not because they are deserving or worthy, but in spite of their weaknesses and sins. His redemptive plan created a people who would ultimately bring blessings to the whole world through the promised seed of Abraham, Jesus Christ. There are several lessons which I think we can take from this particular chapter. Genesis 27 shows God's eternal mission is not stopped by human failure. Instead of relying on our perfect choices, God fulfills his promise to bless all nations through broken people, people who make mistakes. So God's promises are not reliant upon perfect people. We would say today that Isaac's family was rather dysfunctional, wouldn't we? Plagued by favoritism, deceit, manipulation. Yet God's promise to use this family to bless the world remained intact. When we look at ourselves, we realize God's promises today are not reliant upon us having perfect families or flawless strategies. The message of Jesus advances because of God's grace and not our perfect execution of the message. We also see from this chapter that God's blessings can't be stopped by people. Isaac's blessing over Jacob was not just a wish for good luck. It was a transfer of identity and the continuation of God's covenant with Abraham to be a blessing to the nations, ultimately through the Messiah. And as Christians, we are to carry the same blessing to all nations because the Messiah has come. We are called to share the good news of Jesus with everyone. We must keep our focus on reaching others rather than concentrating on our own selfish preferences. And finally, we are not self-reliant. We need God. Isaac, Rebekah, and Jacob all tried to achieve God's promised goals through their own human deceitful plans. This self-reliance resulted in a fractured relationship and ultimately, for Israel, long-term exile. The ends do not justify the means. In our efforts to lead others to faith in Jesus, we must rely on God and His Spirit rather than manipulation, marketing, or coercion. Thank you for joining us for this lesson from Genesis chapter 27, looking at the life of Isaac. This is where we have a bit of a scene change. And from chapter 28, really till we finish this particular series in chapter 38, we're going to be looking at the life of Jacob. So next week, we'll be looking at chapter 28.